I walked in 24 hours before our wedding to find my fiancé's hand wrapped tight around my little sister's throat. I screamed, dropping my bag, thinking he was attacking her. But she didn't pull away. She wasn't gasping for air, she was gazing up at him with pure, twisted adoration. Lily looked me dead in the eye, adjusted her lingerie, and smiled. I finally took what you never deserved. The wedding was cancelled, but he stayed. Today, I saw their wedding photo on Instagram. Her caption: "Proud I stole the best catch from my own blood." I stood at the stove in our tiny apartment on the 3rd floor of an old brick building in Brooklyn, stirring the bolognese sauce as the air filled with the scent of fresh-baked bread from the Italian bakery downstairs and the faint rumble of the subway echoing from the streets below. Outside the window, the lights of Manhattan twinkled like distant stars that had tumbled into the asphalt river of the city. At 25, this evening felt like the perfect extension of our quiet life together, me, with my light hair pulled into a careless bun, and James, my fiancé, due back any minute from his job at the Contemporary Art Gallery in Chelsea. We'd been together for 2 years, and now, with the ring on my finger, everything seemed so solid, so right. I smiled to myself, remembering how he'd whispered about our future last night: a house in Queens, kids running wild in Prospect Park. The warmth of that memory wrapped around me like the steam rising from the pot, making the cramped kitchen feel almost spacious. The door to the kitchen creaked open, and in walked my younger sister Lily, fresh from her classes at the college in Manhattan. At 23, with her mop of chestnut curls and that spark in her eyes that always made me feel a decade older than I was, she tossed her bag onto a chair and hugged me from behind, burying her nose in my shoulder. Smells like heaven. Cooking for your prince, she giggled, and I laughed, swatting her away gently. Yes, and for you too, you lazy thing. Mom and Dad will be here later, so play nice. She nodded, but in her smile, there flickered something sharp, like a shard of glass catching the soft glow of the lamp overhead. It was gone in an instant, replaced by her usual playful grin, but it left a tiny ripple in the air, like the first drop of rain before a storm. I turned back to the sauce, tasting it on the spoon, adjusting the salt with a pinch more. Everything had to be just right tonight, the first real family dinner since the engagement. When James finally stepped through the door, a bouquet of peonies in one hand and that wide smile lighting up his dark face, the room seemed to brighten, as if he'd brought the sun inside with him. He kissed me deeply, his arms wrapping around me in that strong, reassuring hold that always made the world feel smaller and safer, then turned to Lily with the flowers extended. For the lady of the house. She took them, her fingers lingering just a moment too long on his hand, and murmured so softly it was almost a whisper, "Thanks, big guy." I didn't catch it, too busy setting the table with the mismatched plates we'd collected over the years, but as James turned back to me, Lily stepped away, and in the reflection of the window, her eyes, mirroring the city's glittering lights, flared with a strange, hungry gleam that made the peonies in her grasp look suddenly wilted. I shook off the odd sensation, chalking it up to the flickering bulb above the sink. Lily had always been the dramatic one, the one who turned heads without trying. Dinner unfolded smoothly, the 4 of us, well, 3 for now, with Mom and Dad en route, gathered around the scarred wooden table under the hum of our old vinyl player spinning jazz records. Laughter bubbled up like the wine in our glasses, James sharing stories from the gallery, about a new installation that twisted light and shadow into questions of identity, and Lily chiming in with her exaggerated tales from campus, her voice light and teasing. I poured the red wine, watching how the deep crimson caught the lamplight, and felt a swell of contentment. This was us, woven together in the chaos of Brooklyn, where sirens wailed in the distance like a soundtrack to our lives. James's hand found mine under the table, his thumb tracing lazy circles on my skin, and I squeezed back, my heart steady in its rhythm. Lily raised her glass in a mock toast, her curls bouncing as she leaned forward, but her gaze lingered on James a beat longer than it should have, pulling the moment just slightly off kilter, like a record skipping on a groove. As the evening wound down and Mom and Dad arrived with their usual flurry of hugs and questions, Dad grumbling about traffic on the bridge, Mom fussing over the sauce like it was her own recipe, we settled into easy chatter, the apartment alive with the clink of forks and the low murmur of family. James fit seamlessly, his deep laugh blending with Dad's dry wit, while Lily played the perfect hostess, refilling glasses and batting her lashes at everyone's jokes. But beneath it all, I caught glimpses, the way her foot brushed James's under the table once, dismissed as an accident in the tight space, the subtle arch of her brow when he described a painting of urban solitude. It was nothing, I told myself, just the energy of the night, the wine loosening tongues and limbs. Yet as plates emptied and stories faded, a quiet undercurrent tugged at me, like the pull of the East River at dusk. Later, after everyone had drifted off, Mom and Dad to the guest room down the hall, James to the shower with the water drumming like rain on the fire escape, I cleared the table alone, the jazz record spinning to its end with a soft hiss. That's when I found Lily's scarf, forgotten in the folds of the tablecloth, its silk cool against my fingers. As I shook it out, something caught, a single dark curl, too short and coarse to be mine or Lily's, tangled in the fringe like an unwelcome secret. My heart stuttered, a cold prickle racing up my spine. James's hair, from when he'd leaned over to pass the salt? But no, it was too deliberate, too out of place in the soft lamplight. I stared at it, the city's glow casting long shadows across the linoleum, and for a moment, the apartment felt less like home and more like a stage, props scattered in the aftermath of a scene I hadn't fully watched. I tucked the strand away, blaming the late hour, the fullness of the meal settling heavy in my chest, but doubt lingered, a whisper amid the settling quiet. Night fell over Brooklyn softly, the neon haze from the avenue filtering through the blinds in stripes of pink and blue. I slipped into bed beside James, his skin warm and familiar against mine, his breathing even as he murmured something sleepy about tomorrow's plans. The apartment creaked in the hush, pipes groaning like old bones, and I lay there, eyes tracing the cracks in the ceiling, willing sleep to come. But then, from the hallway, a faint rustle, bare feet on wood, a door latch clicking too late, too deliberate. Lily's room, closing with a sigh that echoed in the stillness. I turned toward James, pressing closer, but the sound replayed in my mind, a small fracture in the peace we'd built, hinting at currents running deeper than the subway tunnels below. Outside, a car horn blared, sharp and insistent, and I wondered, just for a fleeting second, what shadows it chased away. A week slipped by in a blur, and our Brooklyn apartment morphed into a whirlwind of wedding preparations, stacks of fabric swatches and invitation mock-ups cluttering every surface like urban driftwood washed up from the Hudson. I dashed through the bridal salons in Soho, fingers trailing over lace and silk, finally settling on a gown with delicate sleeves that whispered against my skin like a promise of forever. The mirrors there reflected a version of me I barely recognized, poised, radiant, the city's hum a distant pulse beyond the frosted windows. James, with his athletic frame cutting through the chaos like a steady current, spent his days meeting suppliers for the ceremony in that tucked-away garden behind Central Park, his calm confidence turning vendor skepticism into eager nods. I'd watch him sometimes, phone in hand, describing floral arches and string lights to me over hurried calls, his voice low and assured, grounding me amid the frenzy. It felt like we were building something unbreakable, layer by layer, against the relentless tide of New York. Lily, ostensibly pitching in, mostly lounged through the heat, her short shorts and tank tops clinging to her sun-kissed skin in ways that made the apartment's wheezing air conditioner seem like a cruel joke. Summer had clamped down on the city with a vengeance, turning the streets into shimmering mirages and our third-floor space into a sauna where sweat beaded on foreheads like unsolicited confessions. She'd flop onto the couch with a fan whirring lazily overhead, flipping through bridal magazines not for advice but for ammunition, her comments laced with that signature bite. This veil looks like a ghost's bad hair day, perfect for scaring off cold feet. I laughed it off, too buried in checklists to probe deeper, but her presence lingered like humidity, thickening the air whenever James was near. One afternoon, as I pinned hem samples to a makeshift dress form in the living room, she sauntered by, trailing a finger along the fabric. "You're really going all in, huh? Hope it fits the fairy tale." Her tone was light, but her eyes held a glint, appraising, as if measuring the gown against some invisible rival. That morning, the one that started it all feeling off-kilter, I'd slipped out early for coffee on the corner, the bodega's bell jingling like a warning as I pushed through the door. The line snaked long, baristas shouting orders over the hiss of espresso machines, and I scrolled through my phone absent-mindedly, double-checking the florist's email about peony availability. Back home, the apartment would be quiet, James nursing his first cup, Lily still tangled in sheets from a late night out. Or so I thought. By the time I returned, paper cups steaming in my hand, the kitchen hummed with voices, low and edged with something I couldn't quite place. I paused in the hallway, the scent of fresh grounds mingling with the faint jasmine of Lily's perfume, and felt a flicker of unease, like stepping into a room where the conversation had just hushed. "Hey, James," Lily's voice floated out, playful yet laced with a teasing undercurrent, as if she were dipping a toe into uncharted waters. I lingered just out of sight, the floorboards cool under my bare feet, heart picking up a subtle rhythm. "You're from Harlem, right? Tell me what it's like being so strong in this big city." The words hung there, provocative, stirring the air like a match struck in the dim. James's response came measured, the clink of his mug against the counter punctuating it. He was pouring coffee, I could picture it, his broad shoulders flexing under the thin t-shirt, steam curling up like secrets. "Strong? That's a stereotype, Lily. But if you want, I can show you what it's like to keep the rhythm in a jazz club on Lexington Avenue." His tone carried a wry edge, dark eyes likely meeting hers in the window's reflection, where the skyline framed them like an unintended portrait. She laughed then, a bright, cascading sound that echoed off the cabinets, and I heard the scrape of her chair as she drew closer, the floor creaking under her shift. "Oh, I love rhythm. Especially that kind, raw, you know? The kind that makes you forget the beat altogether." Her hand must have brushed his shoulder, accidentally, because there was a pause, a breath held too long, the kind that stretches silence into something tangible. I stepped forward then, pushing the door wide with my hip, the coffee sloshing slightly in its cup. "Morning, you too. Save me some?" My voice cut through, cheerful on purpose, but the scene froze for a split second, Lily leaning in, James's brow arched, the window fogging faintly from the kettle's aftermath. They sprang apart like elastic, her grin flashing wide and innocent, his nod easy as he slid a mug my way. The moment dissolved, but it left a residue, sticky as the summer air, clinging to the edges of my thoughts. The days blurred onward, wedding tasks piling like unchecked voicemails, venue confirmations, cake tastings in hidden bakeries off Flatbush where the air sweetened with vanilla and regret for calories unspoken. I'd drag Lily along sometimes, hoping to bond over satin bows and seating charts, her commentary a mix of sarcasm and surprising insight. "Put Aunt Carla next to the bar, she'll think it's a compliment." James joined when he could, his presence a balm, squeezing my hand under cafe tables as we debated fonts for the programs. Yet in the lulls, back in the apartment, I'd catch her watching him, subtle at first, a linger on the way his muscles shifted when he lifted boxes of decor from the stoop, or the curve of his smile when he teased me about my indecisiveness. It wasn't overt, not yet, but it gnawed at me like the distant wail of an ambulance slicing through the night, urgent but directionless. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the skyline in bruised oranges, Mom and Dad arrived for what was billed as a casual pre-wedding check-in, their cab honking to a stop outside like an impatient guest. Dad, ever the pragmatist with his rumpled button-down and calculator mind, hauled in a bottle of his lucky scotch from Long Island, while Mom fluttered in with Tupperware of her famous lemon bars, the scent cutting through the city's exhaust like a memory of simpler summers. We gathered around the table, the same scarred wood from that first dinner, now laden with takeout from the Thai spot on Bedford, steaming curries and jasmine rice that fogged the windows against the encroaching dusk. Laughter flowed easy at first, Dad grilling James on gallery life with the precision of a deposition, Mom cooing over dress photos I'd printed out. Lily sat across from James, her bare legs crossed under the table, and I noticed, couldn't not, the way her foot, accidentally, grazed his calf once, twice, dismissed with a quick apology that dissolved into giggles. The conversation meandered through familiar grooves, how New York chewed up dreams and spat out survivors, the latest bridge traffic horror stories, James's tales of curating exhibits that blurred race and abstraction in ways that made Dad nod thoughtfully. Lily leaned into it all, her cheeks flushing with wine or warmth, laughing a touch too loud at his punchlines, her eyes locking on his with an intensity that pulled the room's gravity askew. "You're a natural storyteller, James," she said once, her voice dipping low, foot inching nearer under the cloth's cover. I shifted in my seat, fork scraping plate, the spice in the pad thai suddenly sharp on my tongue. It was nothing, I rationalized, the wine, the heat making everyone restless, but the air thickened, charged like the moments before a thunderstorm rolls in over the river, promising release or ruin. As plates cleared and the scotch made its rounds, the talk turned personal, Mom probing gently about our plans post-honeymoon, Dad muttering approvals over the rim of his glass. James draped an arm around my shoulders, his touch steady, and I leaned into it, the weight a reminder of why we were here, forging this path amid the concrete jungle. Lily excused herself midway, slipping to the kitchen for ice, but not before her gaze flicked to James, a silent challenge wrapped in silk. When she returned, clinking cubes into tumblers, her hip brushed his chair deliberately, and he stiffened, just a fraction, but enough for me to feel the shift, like a fault line trembling beneath the surface. The evening wrapped with hugs at the door, promises of the rehearsal dinner, but as their taillights faded down the avenue, the apartment exhaled, heavy with unspoken echoes. That night, tangled in sheets damp from the day's humidity, James and I lay listening to the symphony of the street, tires hissing on wet asphalt after a sudden shower, distant horns bleating like lost souls. My head on his chest, I traced the lines of his collarbone, whispering into the dark, "You glad I brought you into all this family madness?" His lips brushed my forehead, warm and unhurried. "Of course, baby. They're part of you, they're home." The words settled over me like a blanket, soothing the day's frayed edges, and I drifted towards sleep, his heartbeat a steady drum against my ear. But across the thin wall, in the corridor's hush, I sensed her, Lily, wide awake, sheets twisted in her fists, mind churning with the injustice of it all. Why did everything good, solid, land in Emma's lap without a fight? The city murmured outside, indifferent, as envy coiled tighter in the shadows. Morning broke sticky and insistent, sunlight slicing through the blinds in golden knives that warmed the linoleum. I padded to the kitchen first, craving the ritual of brewing coffee, the machines gurgle a small victory over the haze. James stirred later, his footsteps heavy and familiar, pulling me into a sleepy embrace against the counter. Laughter bubbled as we planned the day, me to another fitting, him to confirm the caterer, but then the fridge door swung open, revealing Lily's scrawl on a neon post-it, "Off to that dress fitting for yours truly, don't miss me too much, sis." And James, coffee's on, winky face, the wink and ink hit like a splash of cold water, playful on the surface but laced with something sharper, a hook disguised as jest. I peeled it off, crumpling it lightly, but the words lingered, imprinting on the fridge's white face like a dare. James chuckled, pouring his cup, oblivious or choosing to be, but I felt the pull again, that undercurrent, widening, threatening to drag us all under. The apartment buzzed back to life as Lily burst through the door mid-morning, arms laden with garment bags from the salon, her energy a whirlwind that scattered papers across the floor. "It's perfect, Emma, wait till you see how it hugs," she crowed, unzipping the largest to reveal folds of ivory lace that caught the light like fresh snow on Central Park lawns. I ran my hands over it, the fabric cool and yielding, a tangible step toward the aisle, but her proximity to James as she modeled a veil, twirling dramatically, her laughter ringing, set my teeth on edge. He applauded politely, eyes crinkling at the corners, and she beamed at him, the moment stretching elastic until I cleared my throat, redirecting to seating charts. Gratitude mixed with irritation in my chest, she was helping, after all, her flair turning drudgery into sparkle. Yet as she draped the veil over my shoulders later, adjusting pins with deft fingers, her breath warm on my neck, I caught her reflection in the mirror, eyes not on me, but flicking toward the doorway where James had paused, phone in hand. Afternoon brought a rare lull, the three of us sprawled in the living room amid half-unpacked boxes of favors, tiny jars of honey from a Brooklyn apiary, labels curling in the heat. Lily commandeered the fan, propping it between us like a referee, and launched into stories from her art history seminar, gestures wild and inclusive. James engaged, countering with gallery anecdotes that drew parallels between Renaissance masters and street murals in Bushwick, their banter flowing like a duet I'd never heard rehearsed. I joined in fits, sketching table assignments on a notepad, but envy pricked unexpectedly, not of her youth or ease, but of the effortless spark she ignited in him, a side I knew but rarely saw unfiltered. The sun slanted lower, casting long shadows that danced across the walls, and as laughter peeked over a shared punchline, her knee nudged his on the couch, lingering a beat before retreat. Accidental, surely, in the squeeze of space, but the air hummed afterward, alive with possibility I wished away. Evening crept in with takeout aromas wafting from the oven, pizza from the spot down the block, cheese bubbling golden under the broiler. We ate cross-legged on the floor, boxes open like treasure maps, trading slices and slices of life. My stresses over vows that felt too trite, James's amusement at a client's absurd request for edible sculptures, Lily's mock horror at the idea of monogamy in a city of temptations. "Come on, it's all about the chase," she quipped, sauce smudged on her lip, eyes locking on James with a wink that landed like a pebble in still water. Ripples spread. He met it with a raised glass, to chases that end well, and I toasted too, but the words tasted metallic, foreshadowing. The fan whirred on, stirring napkins into flutters, and as grease-stained fingers intertwined in a mock three-way pinky swear, I felt the fragility, the thin veil between harmony and fracture, held by threads as delicate as the lace awaiting alteration. Night deepened, the city's pulse sinking with ours as we retreated to routines, James sketching late into emails, me folding linen scented with lavender from Mom's care package. Lily vanished to her room early, door clicking shut with finality, but not before brushing past James in the hall, her "good night," a murmur that trailed like smoke. In bed, his arms encircled me, bodies aligning in the familiar dance that chased doubts away, whispers weaving futures amid the creak of springs. Sleep claimed us gently, but in the witching hours, when the apartment held its breath, Lily's silhouette might have padded past our door, insomnia's ghost, fueled by the gnawing why of it all. Why her sister, always the steady one, reaping rewards without the grit? The question looped, silent and corrosive, as dawn's first light crept under the sill, promising another spin in the wedding's accelerating carousel. By week's end, the preparations crested like a wave about to break, final calls to the officiant, a park permit stamped and gleaming. I stood at the window that Saturday, surveying the avenue's bustle, vendors hawking iced teas, joggers weaving through pedestrian rivers, and felt a surge of anticipation laced with fatigue. James joined me, chin on my shoulder, his breath steady against my ear. "We're almost there," he murmured, hands spanning my waist, and I nodded, melting into the contact. Lily emerged from her lair then, hair tousled from a nap, stretching cat-like in the doorway. "What's the plan, lovebirds? More lists?" Her tone teased, but her gaze appraised us, lingering on his hold, a flicker of something raw crossing her features before the mask slipped back. We dove into tasks, her sorting RSVPs with surprising efficiency, me pinning boutonnieres to a corkboard, yet the undercurrent persisted, a hum beneath the chatter, like subway vibrations you feel but can't see. Dinner that night was simple, a picnic hauled to the rooftop, sandwiches from the deli, wine chilled in a bucket scavenged from storage. The skyline sprawled before us, a jagged crown of light, and we toasted to resilience amid the sprawl. Lily dominated the skyline stories, pointing out hidden gems, a speakeasy tucked in Tribeca, a mural alley in the village, her passion infectious, drawing James into debates on urban evolution. I savored the charcuterie, the easy camaraderie, but noted the lean of her body toward his as stars pricked the haze, the wine loosening boundaries. A breeze stirred, carrying distant mariachi from a street festival, and in that melody's sway, her hand found his knee briefly, a steadying touch amid laughter. Pulled away quick, but the imprint burned in my periphery, fanning embers of doubt into quiet flame. As the rooftop emptied of warmth, we descended in single file, the stairwell's echo amplifying footsteps into confessions. Back inside, the note on the fridge caught my eye again in memory's replay, its wink a punctuation to the day's script. James crashed early, exhaustion claiming him whole, while I lingered over tea, steam curling like questions unanswered. Lily's door stayed cracked, a sliver of lamplight spilling into the hall, and I wondered at the shadows within, tossings, turnings, the forge of resolve in solitude. The clock ticked past midnight, Brooklyn's night chorus swelling, and sleep evaded me, mind replaying vignettes, the shoulder touch, the foot's graze, the rhythm's lure. Why did harmony feel so precariously perched, one nudge from discord? The answer hovered, elusive as fog over the bridge, but morning's note heralded its approach, jaunty and unrepentant. The wedding loomed closer, and the tension in our Brooklyn apartment thickened like the midday smog hanging over the East River, hazy and suffocating, turning every breath into a reminder of the countdown ticking in my veins. Days blurred into a frenzy of last-minute details, confirming the string quartet setlist over crackling phone lines, folding crisp napkins into swans that mocked my fumbling fingers under the kitchen's harsh fluorescent. I'd catch myself staring at the calendar on the fridge, red circles around dates that felt both exhilarating and precarious, like walking a tightrope strung between skyscrapers. James moved through it all with his usual poise, his athletic build navigating the clutter of sample menus and ribbon spools as if they were mere obstacles in a familiar gallery exhibit. Yet beneath his steady smiles, I sensed a subtle strain, a tightening in his jaw when the phone buzzed with vendor updates, mirroring the knot low in my stomach that wouldn't unravel no matter how many deep breaths I took amid the city's relentless hum. That morning dawned muggy, the kind of summer sticky that plastered clothes to skin before you'd even stepped outside, the air conditioner wheezing like an old man fighting for air. I rummaged through my closet for something presentable for the final fitting, settling on a simple sundress that fluttered against my thighs as I twisted before the mirror, practicing the poised tilt of my head for the aisle. James was already at the kitchen table, laptop open to a cascade of emails, his dark eyes scanning lines with the focus he reserved for appraising abstract sculptures, intense, unyielding. Lily's door remained shut, a sliver of shadow under the frame suggesting she was still lost in the cocoon of her sheets, the faint whir of her fan the only sign of life. I leaned over him, pressing a quick kiss to his temple, inhaling the clean scent of his soap mixed with the bitter edge of fresh coffee. Heading to Midtown for the dress tweak, shouldn't be more than an hour or two. Back for lunch, promise. Don't let her rope you into anything too chaotic. He glanced up, his hand squeezing my waist briefly, warm and reassuring. We've got this. Go conquer that lace. His words landed soft, but as I grabbed my bag and keys, a fleeting shadow crossed his face, gone before I could name it, leaving me to wonder if it was just the light slanting through the blinds. The subway ride to Midtown was a sardine can rattle of elbows and murmured apologies, the tunnel's fluorescent flicker casting my reflection in fragmented glimpses on the grimy windows, a bride-to-be with wide eyes and a heart pounding out wedding day nerves. I emerged into the crush of tourists and suits, the bridal salon's cool marble lobby a sanctuary of hushed elegance, where racks of gowns gleamed like forbidden fruits under spotlights. The seamstress pinned and tucked with expert tugs, her pins whispering against the fabric as she murmured approvals. It falls just so, elegant, timeless. I spun before the trifold mirrors, the lace sleeves brushing my arms like ghostly fingers, and for a moment, doubt evaporated. I saw us there, James waiting at the garden's end, vows exchanged under blooming arches while the park's greenery framed our forever. Texts pinged in from him mid-session, Lily's up, raiding the fridge. All good here, and I smiled, firing back a heart emoji, the seamstress chuckling at my glow. Time stretched in that mirrored cocoon, each adjustment a stitch binding excitement to reality, until the clock nudged noon, pulling me back to the street's sweltering embrace. Back on the platform, waiting for the downtown train, I scrolled through photos of the garden venue, those wrought iron gates tangled in ivy, the secluded lawn where we'd say I do amid the whisper of leaves and distant traffic. A vendor had sent mock-ups of the setup, fairy lights dangling like fireflies, tables draped in white linen echoing the East River's shimmer at dusk. My thumb hovered over a shot of the altar space, heart swelling with the tangible nearness of it all, but a prickle of unease stirred, unbidden, like the faint ozone scent before a storm. Lily's last text from yesterday lingered in my mind, some quip about Vale Heights that read too flirty, too pointed, and I shook it off, blaming the heat warping the air around the tracks. The train screeched in, doors hissing open, and I stepped aboard, jostled into a seat where I could almost taste the lunch we'd share, perhaps sandwiches from the deli, crusty bread stuffed with prosciutto, eaten cross-legged on the living room floor amid the chaos of half-sorted favors. Emerging from the subway onto our block, the avenue pulsed with midday life, vendors hawking iced coffees from carts, a busker strumming blues on a beat-up guitar that cut through the taxi horns like a raw confession. Our building stoop welcomed me with its familiar chipped steps, and I bounded up, key jingling in my pocket, anticipation bubbling for James's reaction to the gown's final sheen. The lobby smelled of yesterday's garlic from the neighbor's stir-fry, a comforting undernote to the jasmine twinge that hid as I climbed the stairs, faint but insistent, like Lily's perfume trailing in her wake. At the door, I paused, ear to the wood, no clatter of dishes, no murmur of voices, just the muffled thrum of the AC battling the heat. Turning the knob, I stepped into the dim coolness, bag slipping from my shoulder as the scene unfolded, Lily on the couch, legs tucked under her in that thin silk robe that skimmed her thighs like a whisper of scandal, a stack of invitations fanned across her lap like surrendered cards. James at the kitchen table still, but his laptop screen dark now, posture rigid as he stared at the scattered papers between them. I dropped my bag by the door, the thud pulling their heads up in unison, Lily's cheeks blooming pink, a flush that climbed her neck like spilled wine, while James offered a quick smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, you're back early. How'd it go?" His voice was even, but he rose too abruptly, crossing to the sink where he busied himself rinsing a mug, water rushing loud over the porcelain. Lily gathered the invitations with a rustle, her robe shifting as she straightened, the silk catching the light in a way that made the room feel smaller, more charged. "Perfect timing, sis, these addresses are a nightmare." James was just saving the day. Her tone lilted bright, but her fingers trembled slightly on the edges of the envelopes, and she avoided my gaze, tucking a curl behind her ear with a motion too deliberate. I nodded, kicking off my shoes, the linoleum cool under my feet as I padded over, peering at the mess, names crossed out, zip code scribbled in margins, chaos indeed. Yet something hung in the air, thick as the humidity outside, a residue of words unspoken, scents mingled, her jasmine sharp against the coffee's fade. "Looks like you two made progress," I said, sliding onto a stool at the counter, watching James's back as he scrubbed harder than needed, suds foaming white like unspoken defenses. Lily hummed agreement, flipping through the stack, but her knee bounced under the coffee table, a restless tick that betrayed the calm she wore like a second skin. I reached for a stray envelope, tracing the elegant script of Aunt Carla's address, and felt a pang, not jealousy, exactly, but a hollow echo of isolation, as if I'd walked in on a private rhythm I'd been excluded from. James turned then, drying his hands on a dish towel, the fabric twisting in his grip before he draped it over the oven handle. "Lunch?" I was thinking that falafel spot around the corner, my treat. His eyes met mine finally, warm but evasive, sliding away to the window where the skyline mocked us with its indifferent glitter. I smiled, pushing down the unease, and nodded, the moment fracturing into motion, Lily stacking papers neatly, me grabbing wallets, the door clicking shut behind us like a seal on a secret I couldn't yet name. The falafel joint buzzed with the lunch rush, a hole in the wall on the avenue where the air sizzled with cumin and tahini, pita pockets steaming from the press like warm embraces. We squeezed into a corner booth, vinyl seats sticking to thighs in the AC's feeble fight, and ordered the works, crispy balls wrapped in fluffy bread, drizzled with garlic sauce that threatened stains on my sundress. Conversation flowed in fits, Lily recounting a campus scandal involving a professor's ill-advised tweet, her laughter pealing high and forced, while James countered with a gallery mishap, paint-splattered interns fleeing a toppled canvas like modern art's apocalypse. I chimed in with fitting anecdotes, the seamstress's tale of a runaway zipper at a previous bride's panic, but my eyes kept drifting to the subtle shifts, Lily's fork lingering near his plate, offering a bite with a fork extended too far, James's polite decline paired with a glance that lingered on the street outside. The food grounded me, flavors bursting sharp and savory, but the booth felt like a pressure cooker, heat rising not just from the grill but from the undercurrents swirling beneath the banter. Afternoon dragged us back into the apartment's orbit, the sun slanting golden through the windows as we unpacked the leftovers, fridge humming approval at the Tupperware's click. Lily vanished to change, her robe swapped for cut-off jeans and a tank that bared midriff, claiming a need for real clothes to tackle more invites. James and I retreated to the bedroom briefly, his arms pulling me close in a hug that pressed doubts away, his lips brushing my ear with a murmured, "Missed you, even for an hour." I melted into it, hands framing his face, the stubble rough under my palms like textured canvas, but as we broke apart, a faint red mark caught my eye on his forearm, faint crescents, like nails dug in haste, dismissed as a scratch from boxing the decor yesterday. He followed my gaze, rubbing it absently, and changed the subject to park permits, steering us back to safety. The mark faded under scrutiny, but it etched itself in my mind, a tiny scar on the day's smooth facade. By evening, the city's pulse quickened, streetlights flickering on like hesitant stars against the deepening blue, and we opted for the small Thai place on Bedford Avenue, a dimly lit nook where lanterns swayed like fireflies and the air hummed with sizzle walks and murmured orders. The booth was intimate, bamboo screens partitioning us from the bustle, and we dove into shared plates, pad see tangled with wide noodles, green curry bubbling fiery green. Lily was quieter than usual, her usual torrent of quips reduced to nods and smiles, fork tracing patterns in her rice as if mapping unspoken routes. James ordered his favorite, basil chicken with a kick that made his eyes water, and I teased him over it, our knees knocking companionably under the table. Yet midway through, as steam curled between us like veils, I felt it, a brush, subtle as a draft, Lily's foot grazing his ankle, lingering a fraction too long before retreating with a murmured, "Oops, cramped in here." He shifted, clearing his throat, but his gaze flicked to hers, a spark passing silent and swift, like flint struck in the dark. The touch replayed in my periphery, innocent on the surface but laced with intent, and I speared a shrimp harder than needed, the sauce splattering my napkin like blood from a pinprick. Conversation veered to safer shores, Mom's latest recipe tweaks for the rehearsal dinner, Dad's gruff approval of the menu, but Lily's silence amplified, her eyes downcast yet watchful, cheeks still holding that faint flush from morning. James engaged more, drawing her out with a question about her thesis, his voice low and engaging, but each word felt like a thread pulled taut, vibrating with underlayers I strained to ignore. The curry's heat bloomed on my tongue, mirroring the slow burn in my chest, and as plates emptied, the waitress's arrival shattered the tension, bills divvied with awkward laughs. Outside, the avenue thrummed with evening strollers, neon signs buzzing alive, but the walk home carried weight, steps sinking unevenly, Lily trailing a beat behind, her shadow merging with his in the pooling light. Back in the apartment, the air had cooled slightly, fans stirring papers into lazy dances across the floor, and we collapsed into unwinding rituals, James cueing a playlist of smooth R&B that filled the space like smoke, Lily curling on the couch with a book she barely read, pages turning without trace. I poured herbal tea, chamomile's floral steam a balm against the day's edges, and settled beside him, head on his shoulder as lyrics wove tales of longing and loyalty. Yet her presence pulled like gravity, foot tapping to the bass from across the room, eyes lifting now and then to catch his profile in the lamplight. A song shifted to something slower, sultrier, and in the dim, her bare foot extended again, accidental arc under the coffee table, toe brushing his socked ankle once more, deliberate in its feint. He froze mid-sip, tea steaming untouched, and met her gaze across the divide, realization dawning like a crack in pavement under pressure. This wasn't fleeting mischief, but the opening salvo in a siege, boundaries blurring into invitation. I pretended not to notice, tracing patterns on James's knee, but the air thickened anew, charged with the unspoken, the playlist's rhythm underscoring the pulse quickening in the room. Lily withdrew her foot with a stretch, feigning a yawn that cracked wide, and excused herself to bed early, door latching with a soft finality that echoed too loud. Alone now, James pulled me closer, his kiss deepening as if to erase the evening's ghosts, bodies aligning in the familiar press that chased shadows away. But even there, a hesitation lingered in his touch, a ghost of grip on my wrist that mirrored marks unseen. We moved to bed soon after, sheets cool against fevered skin, the city's night chorus seeping through cracks, distant laughter from a rooftop party, tires sighing on asphalt. Sleep tugged at me unevenly, dreams fragmenting into veils of lace torn by invisible hands, and in the hush, I wondered at the fracture forming, subtle as a hairline in concrete, poised to spiderweb under the weight of secrets pressing from below. Morning light filtered gray through storm clouds gathering over the river, thunder rumbling low like a warning deferred, and I woke to the scent of rain-washed streets mingling with brewed coffee. James was already up, phone in hand as he confirmed lighting rentals, his voice muffled through the wall as he paced the kitchen. Lily emerged disheveled, robe cinched loose, pouring cereal with mechanical scoops, her eyes puffy as if from fitful dreams. Breakfast passed in fragments, oatmeal stirred too vigorously, small talk about weather apps predicting downpours for the big day, but undercurrents swirled, her glance skimming his bent head, his avoidance a deliberate arc. I cleared plates, suds foaming under my hands like barriers erected in haste, and felt the shift solidify, a secret deepening its roots in the soil of our shared space, invisible yet insistent, ready to upheave the foundation we'd so carefully laid. The day unfolded in staccato bursts, a quick run to the post office for stamped invites, the clerk's stamp thudding like a heartbeat on each envelope, Lily tagging along with half-hearted offers to carry bags. Back home, she commandeered the dining table for address verification. James pulled in reluctantly to proofread, their heads bending close over lists, too close, shoulders brushing in the narrow space. I watched from the doorway, ostensibly folding programs, but my eyes traced the lean of her body, the way his pen paused mid-stroke when her laugh bubbled low at a misspelled street. Jealousy flickered, hot and unbidden, not of affection stolen but of the ease she wielded, a weapon forged in sibling familiarity. He caught my stare, mouthing, "Help," with a grin that eased the knot, and I joined, inserting myself between, the trio's dynamic rebalancing precariously on laughter and ink smudges. Afternoon brought a delivery deluge, caterer samples arriving in insulated crates, aromas of herb-roasted chicken and citrus tarts wafting like temptations through the hall. We unpacked on the counter, forks diving into morsels amid verdicts, too salty, divine crust. Lily savored a bite with exaggerated moan, eyes locking on James over the rim of her glass, provocation veiled in gustatory bliss. He chuckled, deflecting with a countertaste, but the air hummed again, electric with the morning's echo. I sampled a tart, flaky layers crumbling sweet on my tongue, but sweetness soured slightly, observation sharpening into suspicion's blade. As boxes emptied, she accidentally spilled sauce on his sleeve, dabbing at it with a napkin held too long, fingers grazing collarbone. He stepped back, polite but firm, and the moment dissolved into cleanup, but residue clung, sticky as the spill itself. Evening crept in with the promised rain, sheets lashing windows like accusations, thunder growling over the skyline silhouette. We hunkered in with pizza again, delivery boy drenched and grinning as he handed over the box, steam rising like signals in the downpour. Slices folded hot, cheese stretching in gooey strands, we sprawled on the rug, TV flickering a rom-com whose plot twisted too neatly for comfort. Lily's commentary turned sparse, but her position shifted closer on the couch's edge, foot extending in the dim to nudge his once more, feint or follow-up. It landed with intent, pulling a subtle tense from his frame. He ignored it, eyes on the screen, but realization etched deeper, the game's afoot, boundaries breached in increments, the crack widening under rain's relentless patter. I laughed at a scene's punchline, louder than warranted, reclaiming space, but the storm outside mirrored the one brewing, drops racing down panes like tears held back. Night deepened, rain easing to a drizzle that tapped Morse code on the fire escape, and we migrated to beds, exhaustion a heavy cloak. James's embrace enveloped me, steady as ever, whispers tracing collarbones with promises of tomorrow's unmarred. Yet sleep evaded in fits, mind replaying brushes and blushes, the invisible line crossed in my absence. Across the wall, Lily's room stayed dark, but wakefulness pulsed, tossings inferred from creaks, envy fueling fantasies of conquest. The city sighed outside, puddles reflecting neon fractured, and in that fractured glow, the secret took root firmer, a fissure in our asphalt heart, poised for the pressure that would split it wide. Dawn would come gray and unrelenting, but for now, tension coiled, waiting for the spark to ignite. The days melted into a kaleidoscope of New York's relentless lights, each one a fractured prism reflecting the mounting frenzy of our lives as the wedding edged nearer, turning ordinary moments into high-stakes vignettes under the city's unblinking gaze. Streets blurred in my periphery, taxis streaking yellow through rain-slicked avenues, pedestrian rivers surging past delis where the scent of pastrami hung heavy as regret. I'd catch fragments in shop windows, my reflection superimposed over bridal ads promising eternal bliss, a ghost of lace and tulle that both thrilled and taunted. James navigated it with his quiet strength, his hands steady in mine during hurried walks to the printer for programs, his thumb absently stroking my knuckles like a Morse code of reassurance. Yet Lily's shadow lengthened with each passing hour, her laughter a counterpoint that echoed too brightly, pulling threads from the fabric of our preparations like a seamstress gone rogue. The apartment, once a cozy nest, now thrummed with half-packed boxes and scribbled notes, the air thick with the metallic tang of anticipation laced with something sharper, unnamed. The rehearsal dinner unfolded in a restaurant perched high above Times Square, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the chaotic ballet of billboards and crowds below, where neon pulsed like a collective heartbeat refusing to slow. Champagne flowed in golden rivers from flutes that chimed like fragile bells, toasts cascading from relatives I'd half forgotten, Uncle Ray's booming baritone invoking luck, Aunt Carla's slurred wisdom on marital trenches. I floated through it in a sheath of emerald silk that hugged my frame just enough to feel alive, James at my side in his tailored navy suit, his cologne a subtle anchor amid the floral haze of centerpieces. Mom fussed over seating, Dad nursed his scotch with nods of approval, and the room swelled with 24 voices weaving stories of our courtship, each anecdote polished to a warm glow. Laughter crested in waves, cresting higher with each pour, and for stretches, it felt seamless, a prelude to the vows that would bind us under the park's green canopy. Lily arrived fashionably late, slipping through the doors like smoke, her black dress clinging to every curve like liquid obsidian poured over skin, the fabric shifting with each step to catch the chandelier's gleam. Heads turned, murmurs rippling, "Who's the stunner?" From a cousin, Emma's sister, right? From another, and she owned it, chin tilted in that effortless poise that made envy prickle under my ribs. She air-kissed cheeks, her perfume a bold jasmine spike cutting through the room's vanilla undertones, and settled beside James at our table, her placement accidental in the shuffle. As plates of seared scallops and herb-crusted lamb arrived, steaming under silver domes, conversation flowed in eddies, gallery gossip from James's colleagues, campus intrigues from Lily's circle. I watched her lean in, elbow brushing his as she reached for the bread basket, her smile flashing white and knowing, and felt a twinge, not alarm yet, but a subtle discord, like a violin string tuned a hair off pitch. The band struck up midway, soul rhythms unfurling lazy and deep from brass and bass, the kind that seeped into bones and loosened limbs despite the heels pinching my toes. Couples drifted to the small dance floor, a cleared patch of polished oak ringed by velvet ropes, and James pulled me up first, his hand warm at the small of my back as we swayed to the groove, bodies sinking in that intimate shorthand we'd honed over nights in dimly lit bars. The city sprawled beyond the glass, a glittering distraction, but his eyes held mine, dark and steady, whispering fragments of vows he promised to refine. Laughter bubbled from me as he spun me out, the dress flaring like a secret unveiled, and for that song, the world narrowed to us, sweat beating at his temple, my palms slick in his grip. Yet as the set shifted to something sultrier, horns wailing low and insistent, Lily materialized at the edge, her invitation unspoken but clear in the tilt of her head. She cut in seamlessly, claiming a sisterly spin, with a wink that landed light as confetti, and James obliged, his frame enveloping her smaller one in a hold that looked paternal from afar but closer up carried a current, shoulders brushing too fluidly under the lights. I retreated to the bar, ordering a sparkling water to cut the champagne's fog, watching from the stool's perch as they moved, her hips swaying with exaggerated flair, black fabric whispering against his slacks, laughter spilling from her lips in arcs that drew his head down, words lost to the music's swell. The soul track throbbed, bass vibrating through the floorboards into my chest, and I told myself it was harmless, her way of entering the role, playing the vivacious bridesmaid to perfection. Applause from the floor rippled as they finished, her hand lingering on his arm a beat too long, and he extricated with a polite nod, returning to me with flushed cheeks that he blamed on the room's warmth. Joy flickered in me still, mingled now with a vague disquiet, echoing the faint wail of sirens threading up from Midtown's arteries below. Back home that night, the elevator's hum deposited us into the apartment's hush, the rehearsal's effervescence lingering like bubbles on the tongue, my heels discarded in the hall, James loosening his tie with a sigh that spoke volumes of the evening's toll. Lily trailed in last, dress unzipped at the back just enough to tease vulnerability, humming the last soul refrain as she kicked off stilettos that clattered like castanets. We debriefed over nightcaps, water for me, whiskey neat for him, sprawled on the couch amid crumpled programs from the dinner, her input peppered with quips that drew reluctant chuckles. That toast from Uncle Ray? Pure gold, may your fights be short and your makeup sex legendary. She air-quoted with manicured nails, eyes sparkling under the lamp's amber glow, and James snorted, but his glance slid away, fingers drumming the glass rim. I savored the normalcy, the three of us unraveling the night like a shared skein, but her proximity on the cushions, knee angling toward his, stirred that siren echo unease, a low thrum building in the quiet spaces between words. Sleep claimed me early the next night, 2 days from the altar, exhaustion crashing like a wave after a morning of frantic calls to the florist about wilt-prone roses and an afternoon shuttling fabric swatches to the seamstress for emergency hems. The bed enveloped me in cool sheets, James's arm a loose drape over my waist as his breathing evened into rhythm, the city's distant rumble a lullaby filtering through the fire escape. Dreams flickered fragmented, vows recited under blooming arches, but petals falling black as ink, staining the aisle, and I surfaced briefly to his absence, the mattress dipping cold where he'd been. The clock glowed past midnight, but fatigue pulled me under again, trusting the apartment's hush to cradle us through the witching hours. Unseen, the living room stirred, floorboards sighing under bare feet, the fridge's hum punctuating a glass of water poured slow, deliberate. James had slipped out to the balcony, the narrow ledge overlooking Brooklyn's patchwork of rooftops and sodium-lit alleys, a cigarette glowing ember-red between his fingers as he exhaled smoke in lazy coils toward the skyline's jagged teeth. The night air carried a chill off the river, cutting the day's residual heat, and he leaned on the railing, mind adrift in the sprawl, neon signs flickering like faulty memories, a lone siren wailing in the distance like an unfinished thought. Lily emerged then, padding silent in an oversized t-shirt that skimmed her thighs like a borrowed promise, the hem swaying with each step, pretext of thirst clutched in her fist as an empty tumbler. She paused in the doorway, silhouette framed by the living room's dim lamp, eyes adjusting to the balcony's shadows where he stood, broad back to her, smoke curling upward like a question unasked. "Can't sleep?" Her voice sliced the quiet, soft but pointed, as she closed the distance, bare feet whispering over the threshold to flank him from behind. The city's undercurrent thrummed below, tires hissing on damp pavement, a dog's bark echoing off brick facades, and she set the glass on the sill with a faint clink, her hands finding his shoulders, fingers kneading lightly into muscle knotted from the day's weight. Tension crackled instant, the same electric spike from that kitchen morning, where provocation met restraint in a standoff that left bruises unseen. His body stiffened under her touch, cigarette pausing mid-drag, the ember flaring brighter as inhale sharpened. She pressed closer, heat radiating through the thin cotton, jasmine faint but insistent, mingling with tobacco's bite. The balcony felt smaller, walls closing in with the night's humidity, and in that suspended breath, the air thickened, charged with the volatile brew of anger laced through desire's underbelly. He turned slow, deliberate, ash flicking over the edge to tumble into the void, his dark eyes locking on hers in the half-light, reading the challenge etched there like graffiti scrawled in haste. "You won't quit, will you?" The whisper rasped low, edged with warning, his breath ghosting her temple as proximity blurred lines. "Think you can just take what's not yours?" Her response came immediate, body arching nearer, lips hovering at his ear's shell, words a heated murmur that stirred the fine hairs at his nape. "Why not? You called it fire yourself. Let's see how hot it burns." The gauntlet thrown, his hand shot to her waist, fingers splaying firm against the t-shirt's drape, propelling her back against the cold iron railing with a force that rattled the metal faintly. The city sprawled indifferent below, lights winking like conspirators, and in that shadowed pocket, boundaries dissolved, bodies colliding in a surge of defiance and reckoning, breaths ragged against the night's chill, skin igniting like sun-baked asphalt yielding to sudden rain. It unfolded fierce, no tenderness to soften edges, more clash than caress, a duel waged in silenced fury, where each press and pull echoed the argument's fevered close, surrender wrung from resistance like water from stone. The railing bit into her spine, his frame eclipsing the stars, and time warped in the balcony's confines, the gully of Brooklyn swallowing sounds that might have betrayed them, a gasp swallowed, fabric rustling like secret spilled. When momentum crested and ebbed, leaving echoes in the aftershocks, Lily tossed her hair back, strands wild in the breeze, eyes gleaming with feral triumph under the faint moon. "See? I can." The words hung, a declaration etched in the space between, and James released her, stepping back into the balcony's chill, cigarette ground under heel with finality. Smoke lingered, acrid and telling, as she straightened, smoothing the t-shirt's hem with hands that trembled not from cold but conquest's high. Dawn crept in gray and unforgiving, filtering through blinds to stripe the bedroom floor in pallid bars, pulling me from sleep's depths with the insistent chirp of my alarm. James stirred beside me, his side of the bed rumpled but warm, a testament to his return sometime in the night's belly. I padded to the closet in search of fresh clothes, fingers rifling hangers amid the faint chaos of garment bags, when his shirt from the rehearsal caught my eye, draped over the chair's back, navy fabric creased from wear. A smudge marred the collar, crimson and glossy, stark against the dark weave like a misplaced brushstroke. I lifted it closer, thumb rubbing the stain's edge, the faint waxy residue speaking of lips or glass, and turned as he emerged from the bathroom, towels slung low on hips, hair damp and tousled. Lipstick? From last night? My tone aimed light, but curiosity edged it, heart ticking a fraction faster in the morning's hush. He glanced over, rubbing stubble with absent strokes, and chuckled low, crossing to pluck the shirt from my grasp. Red wine from the rehearsal, spilled during that toast gone wild. Aunt Carla's fault, she hugged like a vice. The explanation landed easy, his eyes crinkling in that disarming way, and I nodded, folding into the logic, the memory of champagne flutes clinking and spills inevitable and the din relief washed cool, chasing the night's vague dreams away, and I leaned in for a kiss, morning breath be damned, his lips tasting of mint toothpaste and unspoken ease. We dressed in tandem, the routine a small ritual, him buttoning cuffs, me zipping boots, banishing shadows with daylight's practicality. Yet as we moved to the kitchen, coffee brewing with its gurgling promise, a sliver of doubt lingered, oily as the stain's ghost, whispering of hues that wine rarely left so precise. Breakfast unfolded in clipped efficiency, toast charred at edges, jam jars sticky from hasty spoons, Lily emerging late with bedhead curls and a yawn that stretched languid, robe belted loose over pajamas. She poured cereal with mechanical clinks, milk splashing white arcs into the bowl, and settled at the table opposite James, her gaze skimming his over the rim of her mug, subtle, but loaded, a triumphant glint that squeezed my heart like a fist clenching unexpected. I buttered bread, knife scraping loud in the pause, and forced chatter about the day's agenda, final park walk-through, cake delivery slots. She chimed in sporadically, spoon stirring loops in her flakes, but that look persisted, a silent laurel she wore like a crown, pulling the room's gravity toward her orbit. James met it once, brief and hooded, before diverting to his phone, thumb swiping notifications with undue focus. The air hummed undercurrents, breakfast's normalcy a thin veneer over depths stirring unseen. Mid-morning brought the vendor parade, a courier with monogrammed linens that unfolded crisp and starched on the couch, their scent of fresh laundry a brief oasis amid the apartment's clutter. Lily helped by fluffing folds, her movements fluid and showy, bending low enough that the robe gaped, drawing James's averted glance to the window's skyline. I directed placements, pinning labels with thumbtacks that pricked skin like tiny warnings, gratitude for her effort warring with the prickle of exposure's threat, the way her laugh trilled too near him when a sheet billowed like a sail. Outside, Central Park loomed in imagination, its greens of verdant promise now shadowed by clouds massing low, a brooding mass that mirrored the unease coiling in my gut, heavy as humidity before a squall. We folded and stacked in rhythm, but her proximity to him during lifts, bodies brushing in the narrow space, amplified the risk, each contact a spark flirting with ignition. Lunch was scavenged from the fridge, leftovers reheated in microwave bursts, the ping announcing readiness like a starting gun, and we ate at the counter, stools creaking under weight, conversation veering to weather apps forecasting clear skies, a mercy for the garden ceremony. Lily's phone buzzed midway, screen lighting her face in blue glow as she typed replies with thumbs flying, but not before I glimpsed the thread, a message to James, timestamped late, words bold and brazen, last night was wild. More? Vanishing under his quick swipe to delete, the act furtive as a pickpocket's dip. My fork paused mid-air, heart contracting sharp in my chest, but she looked up then, eyes meeting mine across the steam, brimming with that same triumphant spark, unrepentant and electric. He cleared his throat, launching into a story of a gallery prank to deflect, laughter forced from us all, but the deletion's echo reverberated, a crack widening in the foundation, thread of unraveling hovering like that park cloud, pregnant with storm. Afternoon dragged us to the park for the walk-through, cab depositing us at the garden's wrought iron gates where ivy clung tenacious, leaves rustling in a breeze that carried hot dog vendors' sizzle from afar. The coordinator bustled, clipboard in hand, marking paths with chalk arrows that ghosted white on flagstone, the aisles curve, altars bloom-ready nook, tables ringed by lanterns yet to ignite. James paced it with her, measuring strides for the processional, his laugh booming at her quip about runaway grooms, while I trailed with Lily, arm linked in hers, the gesture sisterly on surface but tense in the grip. She chattered about veil options, fingers toying with mine, but her gaze strayed to him ahead, whispers of secrets exchanged in sidelong glances that bypassed me entirely. The sun slanted golden through branches, dappling paths in lace-like patterns, but joy curdled subtle, exposure's specter lengthening shadows, each step echoing the balcony's unseen surrender. Evening wound down in the apartment's glow, takeout containers littering the coffee table, sushi rolls pilfered from a midtown detour, soy-dipping dark pools in saucers. We reviewed the walk-through footage on James's phone, the screen's light casting our faces in ethereal blue, laughter punctuating clips of exaggerated bows at the mock altar. Lily nestled closer on the couch, shoulder to his in the squeeze, her commentary laced with innuendo that sailed over my head but landed pointed elsewhere. That spin you did? Pure fire. He deflected with a pillow toss, the fabric muffling impact, but the air crackled residual, deepened now by nocturnal confidences, her texts pinging late, his replies terse but present, a lesson in reciprocity doled out to curb her spoil. I curled against him, chopsticks abandoned, savoring the trio's facade, but her foot, bare and casual, inched toward his under the table once more, retreat time to my shift, triumph veiled in feigned innocence. Night deepened, the city's symphony swelling, horns blaring staccato, laughter spilling from open windows like overflow, and sleep evaded in eddies, my mind replaying the shirt stain, the deleted glow, Lily's gaze like a victor's banner. James slumbered deep beside me, chest rising steady, but I traced the ceiling's cracks, spiderwebbing like the risks we'd sown, her whispers through walls, his retorts sharpening the bond into something barbed and binding. Across the hall, her room stayed lit faint, pages turning in a book unread, secrets brewing in the hush. The balcony door stood ajar, night's breath slipping in cool and accusatory, carrying echoes of ragged breaths and hot skin, the merge a pivot point from flirt to fracture. Dawn loomed, but in the interim, unease bloomed full, a cloudburst waiting over the park's green heart, poised to drench the morrow in revelations raw and unrelenting. The day before the wedding dawned with a deceptive gentleness, sunlight slanting through the Brooklyn apartment's windows like a hesitant promise, gilding the chaos of white ribbons draped over every chair and vase in lazy cascades. The florist had just departed, his van rumbling away down the avenue with a final honk that blended into the city's morning chorus, leaving behind an explosion of lilies, petals unfurling creamy and fragrant on every surface, their scent heavy and cloying, like perfumes spilled in excess. I moved through the living room in a daze, fingers trailing over stems that bent under my touch, the pollen dusting my skin in faint yellow whispers. 24 hours until the garden vows, and the weight of it all pressed on my temples, a throbbing pulse that blurred the edges of checklists I'd pored over for weeks. James lounged on the couch amid the floral siege, a tumbler of whiskey glinting amber in his hand despite the early hour, his dark eyes distant as he scrolled through last-minute confirmations on his phone. Lily's door remained cracked, a sliver of shadow hinting at her presence, but the apartment felt suspended, a breath held too long before the plunge. I paused by the mirror in the hall, adjusting the loose waves of my hair that refused to cooperate, the reflection showing a woman on the brink, eyes bright with nerves, cheeks flushed from the heat that summer refused to relinquish. The lilies mocked me gently, their purity a stark contrast to the knot in my stomach, twisted from excitement laced with the faint, nagging echoes of the past week's oddities, Lily's lingering glances, James's evasive smiles during late-night talks. I shook it off, chalking it up to bridal jitters, the kind Mom had warned about over chamomile tea, her voice crackling through the line from Long Island with tales of her own pre-wedding panic. It's the calm before the storm, Emma, ride it out. But the throb intensified, a hammer against my skull, and I grabbed my wallet from the counter, the leather worn soft from years of subway fares and coffee runs. Aspirin from the corner pharmacy, that's what I needed, a quick fix to steady the ship before the rehearsal's final polish that afternoon. James looked up as I slipped on my sandals, the strap biting into my heel like a small reminder of discomforts yet to come. Head still pounding? His voice was low, concerned, the tumbler set aside as he rose halfway, but I waved him back with a smile that felt brittle at the edges. Just the usual bridal buzz, too much thinking, not enough sleep. I'll pop down to the bodega, grab some pills. 10 minutes, tops, love. I crossed to him, leaning down to press a kiss to his cheek, his skin warm and faintly stubbled under my lips, carrying the faint oak of his whiskey like a secret shared. He caught my hand, thumbs circling my knuckles in that familiar rhythm, eyes locking on mine with an intensity that momentarily stilled the ache. Hurry back. We've got arches to envision. The words wrapped around me, a tether, and I squeezed his fingers before pulling away, the door's latch clicking shut behind me with a finality that echoed in the stairwell's dim confines. The stoop outside welcomed me with the avenue's familiar bustle, delivery trucks idling with exhaust clouds blooming gray, a vendor's cart sizzle of halal lamb cutting through the air like an urgent invitation. My sandals slapped against the pavement, each step jarring the throb in my temples, but the short walk grounded me, the pharmacy's neon sign flickering ahead like a beacon in the midday haze. Inside, the fluorescent buzz hummed over aisles of cough drops and bandages, the clerk, a grizzled man with a Yankees cap tilted low, nodding as I paid for the aspirin bottle, its rattle a small promise of relief in my bag. I lingered a moment by the magazine rack, flipping through a bridal glossy whose glossy pages promised flawless days, models beaming under veils that defied wind and worry. A pang hit then, sharp and unbidden, not doubt in James, but in the fragility of it all, the way one errant thread could unravel the weave. Shaking it free, I stepped back into the sun, the bag crinkling against my thigh, heart lifting at the thought of his arms waiting, Lily sending our return to normalcy. The building's lobby smelled of yesterday's takeout, a faint curry ghost mingling with the elevator's metallic tang as it groaned upward, depositing me at our floor with a ding that felt too loud in the quiet hall. Keys jingled in my palm, cool and reassuring, and I turned the knob, pushing into the apartment's floral embrace, the lily's perfume hitting first, intensified by the closed space, wrapping around me like a veil I couldn't shake. The living room stretched before me, sunlight pooling on the rug in golden spills, white ribbons swaying faintly from an open window's draft. James on the couch, tumbler refilled, posture rigid as if caught mid-thought, Lily emerging from her room like a specter summoned, clad only in lace-trimmed lingerie that clung sheer and defiant, her eyes locking on him with a challenge that sliced the air. Time stuttered, my bag slipping from numb fingers to thud against the threshold, aspirin bottle rolling free to scatter pills across the floor like shattered pearls from a necklace snapped in fury. What? James? The whisper clawed from my throat, raw and disbelieving, as the scene etched itself in brutal clarity, her approach predatory, fingers deft at his shirt's buttons, parting fabric to bare skin, his rise sudden, face storm-dark, words lost but tone thunderous, you don't know when to stop. Yet she pressed on, unyielding, her murmur a blade, I know what I want. And I'll take it. And then the explosion, his hand flashing to her throat, pinning her to the wall with a grip firm but measured, her gasp a sharp intake that widened eyes not in terror but adoration, pupils dilating in submissive gleam, bodies locked in a frozen surge of rage and one that hummed electric, poised to consume. The room tilted, lilies blurring into white smears, the city's distant hum fading to a roar in my ears, my world fracturing like a skyscraper buckling in nightmare slow motion, foundations crumbling under the weight of betrayal's quake. Lily didn't flinch, didn't pull away, her gaze held his, triumphant and unblinking, a victor's crown in the arch of her brow, while his fingers remained curled at her neck, knuckles white against flushed skin, the tableau frozen in its intimate violence. Silence crashed down, heavy as the smog that choked the skyline at dusk, thick and choking, swallowing breaths and screams alike. My knees buckled, vision tunneling to that point of contact, his hand, her throat, the lace's fragile barrier, every detail a dagger twisting deeper, carving out the future we'd sketched in whispers and plans. The scattered pills gleamed mockingly underfoot, innocent white against the rug's weave, and nausea surged, bile rising hot as I turned, legs propelling me blind down the hall, away from the ruin, the door to our bedroom slamming like a guillotine's fall. Inside, the space I'd shared with him for years contracted to a cage, walls pressing in with the scent of his cologne lingering on pillows, our clothes mingled in the hamper like lies entwined. I collapsed onto the bed's edge, hands trembling as they clutched the ring, simple gold band etched with our initials, heavy now as lead, and it slipped free, tumbling to the hardwood with a crystalline clink that echoed like finality's toll. The sound reverberated, pulling a sob from my chest, raw and guttural, tears blurring the room into a watercolor smear, the vanity's mirror reflecting a hollow-eyed stranger, the window framing Brooklyn's indifferent sprawl where life pulsed on, oblivious. My fingers curled empty, tracing the pale groove on my skin where promise had sat, now bare and accusing, the absence a wound that throbbed deeper than any aspirin could touch. Minutes stretched elastic in the dim, the apartment's hush broken only by faint murmurs from the living room, his voice low, urgent, hers a murmur laced with satisfaction that slithered under the door like smoke. I pressed palms to ears, willing deafness, but fragments pierced, Emma, wait, trailing into pleas that rang hollow, drowned by the hammer in my skull now joined by heartbreak's anvil. The lilies scent seeped through vents, cloying and funeral, petals wilting in my mind's eye as symbols soured, purity mocked by the scene etched behind my lids, replaying in merciless loops, her eyes adoration, his grip's possession, the surge that bound them in my absence. Rage flickered then, hot and unfamiliar, mingling with grief's cold tide, but exhaustion pinned me, body curling fetal amid sheets that smelled of us, of what was. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, screen lighting with Mom's name, checking in on the final countdown, her text a string of hearts and, can't wait for tomorrow. And I stared, thumb hovering, the lie of normalcy a chasm too wide to bridge. Delete, silence, the device went dark, mirroring the void yawning in my chest, where vows unspoken echoed like ghosts in the garden's imagined green. Footsteps approached the door then, hesitant at first, James's tread heavy with weight unspoken, knob turning slow as if testing waters frozen over. Emma? His voice cracked the barrier, soft but insistent, and I bolted upright, back to the headboard, arms wrapping knees like armor. The door creaked open, his silhouette filling the frame, shirt half-buttoned, face ashen under the stubble's shadow, eyes pleading in the hall light spill. He stepped in, closing the door with a click that sealed us in confrontation's arena, hands raised placating as if approaching a skittish creature. It's not. God, Emma, let me explain. Words tumbled, fragmented, provocation, lesson, mistake, but they washed over me like rain on glass, distorting without penetrating, each syllable a fresh cut to the raw. Lily's laughter ghosted from beyond, faint and cutting, a punctuation to his pleas that twisted the knife. I met his gaze, searching for the man who'd whispered futures in Prospect Park's shade, but found only fracture, guilt etching lines around eyes that avoided the ring's glint on the floor. She pushed. I was angry, trying to make her see, anger surged anew, propelling me from the bed, bare feet cold on wood as I snatched the ring, hurling it not at him but past, clattering against the wall like shattered trust. He flinched, the sound a whip crack in the tension, and advanced a step, arms outstretched for embrace I dodged, circling to the window where Brooklyn's arteries throbbed below, cars crawling like blood cells in a failing heart. Angry? At her? Or at this, at us? My voice rose, cracking on the edge, tears carving hot paths down cheeks I'd powdered flawless that morning. The lilies outside the glass nodded in breeze, mocking with their serene heads, and I pressed forehead to pain, cool against fevered skin, the city's hum a indifferent dirge. His silence stretched, damning, broken only by a sigh that carried defeat's weight, and when he spoke, it was whisper soft, I love you. This, it changes nothing. But everything had shifted, the axis tilted, and in that lie's echo, grief crested, pulling sobs that racked me silent, shoulders heaving as he hovered, touch withheld by the chasm we'd carved. Time fractured further, minutes bleeding into an eternity of standoff, him sinking to the bed's edge, head in hands, murmurs of regret weaving through my barriers, me at the window, arms crossed tight, dissecting the scene's shards, her lingerie a flag of conquest, his hand a brand of complicity. The phone lit again, insistent vibrations from group chats bubbling rehearsal reminders, oblivious effervescence that curdled in my gut. I silenced it, screen black as resolve hardened, a cold clarity piercing the storm. Tomorrow's garden would stand empty, arches bare of our bloom, guests turned away with excuses spun from whole cloth. Lily's door clicked distant, her footsteps retreating with a sway I could envision, triumphant in her slipped silk, leaving wreckage in wake. James rose then, bridging the gap to wrap arms around me from behind, chin on shoulder, breath ragged against neck, but I stiffened, the contact electric with revulsion, peeling away to face him full, eyes steel in the dim. You chose that, I whispered, voice steady now, honed by betrayal's forge. In that moment, you chose her gaze over everything. His denial crumbled unspoken, face crumpling as truth landed, and he backed toward the door, hands raking hair in frustration's grip. I'll fix this. Talk to her, end it. But the words rang empty, a bandage on arterial bleed, and as he slipped out, closing the portal soft, isolation bloomed full, the room contracting to echo chamber of what-ifs and whys. I slid down the wall, knees to chest, the scattered rings gleam a lone star in the rug's dark weave, its absence on my finger a liberation laced with loss. Outside, the avenue thrummed on, sirens wailing like mourners late to the fall, and in their wail, I heard the wedding's dirge, cancelled in heart if not yet word, the lilies wilting witnesses to empire's end. Evening crept in uninvited, shadows lengthening across floors strewn with ribboned ghosts, the apartment's hush broken by James's pacing in the hall, phone pressed to ear and hushed apologies to vendors, each call a nail in the ceremony's coffin. I stayed barricaded, emerging only for water from the kitchen tap, cold stream shocking parched throat as Lily lounged at the counter, robe draped casual over lingerie remnants, eyes meeting mine with unfeigned glee that twisted like salt in wound. No words passed, just her sip of wine, slow and savoring, the glass's stem twirling like a scepter claimed. Back in sanctuary, I texted Mom's sparse truths, postponing family issues. Her reply a flurry of worry emojis that blurred under fresh tears, the screen's glow a harsh interrogator in the gloaming. James knocked soft later, tray of untouched dinner balanced precarious, sandwich halves, fruit slices wilting like my resolve. But I waved it away, the scent turning stomach, isolation's feast bitter enough. Night fell heavy, Brooklyn's lights piercing curtains like accusatory eyes, the bed vast and accusatory without his warmth, sheets twisted in futile nests. Sleep evaded in fragments, dreams replaying the gasp, the grip, her eyes surrender in loops that jerked me awake, sweat damp and gasping. The ring lay reclaimed on the nightstand, cold sentinel, and I traced its band with fingertip numb, weighing toss or keep, symbol or shackle. Dawn's threat loomed, but in the interim, fury simmered to embers, plotting paths through the rubble, pack a bag for moms, delete shared calendars, reclaim the self eclipsed by their shadow. Lily's laughter filtered faint from the living room, intertwined with his murmur, a duet that sealed the fracture, and in that sound, resolve crystallized. Tomorrow's sun would rise on Exodus, the garden's green surrendered, my heart's skyline forever altered by the storm they'd unleashed. Dawn broke over Brooklyn in a pallid wash, the first light seeping through the blinds like diluted tea, casting long shadows across the apartment's floral wreckage, lilies drooping in vases, petals curling brown at edges as if scorning the farce. I sat on the bed's edge, phone clutched in numb fingers, the screen's glow harsh against my swollen eyes, dialing the officiant with a voice scraped raw from night sobs. I'm so sorry, we can't, family emergency, the words tumbled mechanical, his sympathetic murmur from the garden's edge in Central Park a distant echo, promises of rescheduling lost in static. Next came the emails, fingers flying over keys to blast regrets to 24 inboxes, unforeseen circumstances. Your understanding means everything, each send a small detonation, replies pinging back in waves of shock and concern, hearts and hugs emoji cloaked but piercing. Mom's call pierced last, her voice fracturing from the Bronx line, tears thick as she choked, oh, honey, what happened? We're coming, just hold on. The city stirred outside, garbage trucks grinding like millstones, indifferent to the unraveling within these walls. Packing unfolded in mechanical drifts, hands folding sweaters and jeans into the battered suitcase that gaped open on the rug, each item a relic yanked from shared drawers, his t-shirt snagging on the zipper, her scarf tangled in socks like accusations woven tight. My eyes burned, lids heavy and puffy from salt tracks dried in crusts, but rage evaded, leaving only void, a hollow as vast as New York's rush-hour arteries where cabs surged past pedestrians in blurs of hurry, faces averted, connections severed before begun. The ring sat sentinel on the nightstand, gold mocking in the growing light, and I avoided its gleam, stuffing toiletries into side pockets with shakes that rattled the case's frame. Whispers from the hall filtered faint, Lily's murmur, James's low reply, but I tuned them out, focusing on the zipper's rasp, the final tug sealing fragments of life into portable exile, the apartment's air thick with Lily's fading perfume, a funeral bouquet for dreams interred. The door creaked open mid-fold, James filling the frame like a shadow stretched long, his face gaunt under stubble silver, eyes red-rimmed but pleading as he crossed the threshold in socked feet that whispered defeat. "Emma, please, sit." It was a mistake, one stupid, heated moment. She provoked it, pushed until I snapped, trying to shut her down. His words spilled urgent, hands gesturing empty air, collapsing onto the bed's corner where the mattress dipped under his weight, pulling the suitcase askew. I straightened, arms folding tight across chest like a barrier, the void in me echoing his pleas without absorption, his proximity stirring nausea's faint wave, cologne familiar, now tainted. He reached tentative, fingers brushing my knee, but I shifted, the contact electric with recoil, his sigh heavy as he raked hair back, exposing forehead creased with night's torment. The explanation looped, provocation to lesson gone awry, but cracks showed in his voice, the script rehearsed in hallway whispers, and in that fracture, my emptiness deepened, a chasm-swallowing sound. Lily materialized then, a specter in the doorway's slant, the white wedding dress, my dress, lace sleeves whispering against arms, bodice hugging curves I'd envied in fittings, clinging like stolen skin, the fabric's ivory stark against her flushed cheeks. She leaned against the jamb, posture regal in ruin, eyes locking on James with possessive gleam before sliding to me, calm as a blade unsheathed. "Don't lie to her, or yourself," her voice rang clear, steel-edged and unyielding, slicing the room's hush like scissors through silk. "You wanted it. From that first dinner, the way your eyes lingered, it was there." The words landed precise, no tremor to betray, her chin lifting in quiet command, the dress's train pooling at feet like spilled milk of innocence curdled. James stiffened, mouth parting in protest silenced unborn, his hand twitching midway to her but falling limp, the air congealing thick with her certainty, my void fracturing into shards of ice that pricked without warming to fury. He rose slow, back to her silhouette, but the pull showed in his shoulders' tense line, the unspoken yield in averted gaze, and she stepped forward, lace rustling soft accusation, closing the triangle we'd formed into suffocating knot. I clutched the suitcase handle, knuckles widening on vinyl, the room tilting under her poise, thief in bride's guise, claiming spoils with unblinking right. James's murmur broke faint, "Lily, not now," but it dissolved, plea turning prop, and in that hush, her triumph bloomed, petals unfurling dark where mine had withered, the dress a banner waved over conquered ground. My breath caught shallow, the void pulsing now with nausea's tide, and I turned away, zipping the case final with a rasp that echoed like a door slammed on future sketched in shared breaths. Morning bled toward noon, the sun climbing indifferent over rooftops, gilding the avenue's bustle visible from the window's frame, joggers weaving past dog walkers, coffee steam rising from lids like fleeting prayers. The doorbell buzzed insistent, parents' arrival shattering the standoff, mom's heels clicking urgent up the hall as dad trailed, his wool coat clutched tight despite the heat, face etched in silence's furrows. Hugs enveloped first, her arms fierce around my frame, lavender soap mingling with tears fresh on my cheeks, whispers hot against ear, "My girl, whatever it is, we'll mend it," deep breaths, "Emma, just breathe." Dad hovered, hand patting awkward on shoulder, his nod wordless but weighted, eyes flicking to James in the kitchen's shadow, accusation unspoken in the set of his jaw. Lily hovered peripheral, dress shed for jeans and blouse, but her presence loomed, jasmine faint under Lily's decay, the apartment contracting around our quartet, air heavy with arrival's freight. Lunch assembled haphazard in the kitchen where it all ignited, that scarred table under the window's glare, now laden with deli platters mom unpacked from bags, turkey slices curling at edges, cheeses sweating in foil. We sat in fractured circle, forks scraping plates in uneasy rhythm, conversations skirting edges, weather's muggy turn, traffic snarls on the bridge, until Lily claimed the floor, napkin folded precise beside her, eyes sweeping us with measured calm. "Sister, forgive me if you can. But he's mine now. I proved I could take what's best, what she didn't deserve." The declaration hung, steel in its poise, no apology laced, just fact etched plain as subway graffiti. James sat statue still beside her, fork paused mid-air, but objection died unspoken, his hand drifting to her waist in slow claim, fingers splaying possessive over denim, eyes flickering with that predatory glint, satisfaction's sharp edge, mirroring her unyielding stare. The room froze, breath suspended like rain held in cloudburst, Mom's fork clattering soft to porcelain, Dad's coat rustling as he shifted, knuckles blanching on glass. Lily held gaze on me, unblinking, the kitchen's light haloing her curls like a crown unjustly won, James's touch sealing the shift from interloper to consort. Emptiness in me yawned wider, swallowing the scene into numb distance, their proximity a tableau painted in betrayal's oils, his thumb tracing idle on her side, her lean into it fractional but telling. Silence stretched taut, strings vibrating on break point, until Mom's sob broke it, handkerchief dabbing eyes red-rimmed, her nod tremulous. Lily's always been stubborn, headstrong to a fault. But Emma, darling, you'll find someone stronger, truer. Time heals these cuts. Dad cleared throat, voice gravel low, main thing is families knit tight, whatever shape we hold. The words landed like bandages on gangrene, comfort curdled, and in their echo, my void echoed back, a hollow affirming fracture's permanence. Afternoon waned in suspended drift, parents lingering over coffee gone cold in mugs, small talk fraying at hems, vague plans for holidays, Mom's garden updates from the Bronx plot, while Lily and James orbited kitchen's edge, her hand brushing his arm in casual claim, his nod subdued but aligned. I retreated to packing's final sweeps, suitcase zipped and ready by the door, key glinting on the hall table like a gauntlet dropped. Hugs renewed at threshold, Mom's fierce, Dad's pat firmer now with resolve steel, and as Keb idled outside, horn impatient in the avenue's flow, I paused, scanning the space one last, Lily's sagging in defeat, ribbons limp as hopes discarded. James hovered last, arms half extended, but I sidestepped, the keys clink on with my farewell unspoken, doors sealing behind with click final as lock turned on shared chapters. The cab pulled into traffic's vein, Brooklyn receding in rearview haze, destination a tiny Queen's studio, bare walls and futon waiting, exile sparse embrace. Evening swallowed the drive in twilight's bruise, Manhattan spires piercing sky like accusations unvoiced, the studio's key cold in palm as lock yielded to single rooms dim, kitchenette scarred by previous tenants, bed unmade with sheets thin as pretensions. I collapsed amid boxes unpacked half, phone silenced against incoming waves, cousins' queries, friends' frets, but void held court, emptiness a companion quieter than screams. Sleep came fitful, dreams replaying the grip, the dress, Lily's steel vow in loops that jerked awake sweating, city's night hum seeping through thin walls, trains rumbling subterranean, neighbors' murmurs like judgments whispered. Dawn found me hollowed further, coffee bitter on tongue as I scrolled muted feeds, the wedding's ghost haunting in unsent invites, the garden's green now barren in mind's eye. A month unfurled in Queen's monotonous grid, days blurring into freelance gigs at coffee shops with views of indifferent rails, nights curled on futon with takeout containers as plates, the studio's confines a cocoon spun from solitude's silk. Whispers from Brooklyn filtered sparse, Mom's calls laced with updates, Dad's grunts over speakerphone, but the core news landed via group text, innocuous link to a chapel notice, Lily and James, wed quiet in the same alcove where my vows were to bloom, parents front row witnesses, her glow captured in candid shots that pierced like thorns. The ceremony's hush echoed in descriptions, vows exchanged under stained glass filtering rainbows, rings sliding simple over knuckles that knew another's touch. Lily's whisper at altar, gleaned from a bridesmaid's slip, I stole her best catch, and damn if I'm not proud, hung in ether, a trophy etched in digital permanence, her beam radiant as she leaned into him, the dress repurposed now her own. The photo hit hardest, Instagram's algorithm cruel in its serve, them framed against Manhattan's glittering facade, skyline a jagged crown to their pose, his hand at her throat in jest's light choke, her head thrown back in laughter's arc, eyes alight with conquest's fire. No pain bloomed in me at the sight, just cold rage crystallizing sharp as winter's first ice, veins icing over the void's numb expanse, fingers trembling on screen as thumbs swiped delete on the app entire, account vanishing into void's maw. The image lingered burned in, his touch playful now where once possessive, her triumph a mask of bliss that cracked under scrutiny, hollow as the chapel's echo post vows. Rage settled deep, not volcanic but glacial, plotting slow thaws in the city's underbelly, where secrets fermented like wine turned vinegar. Yet knowledge anchored amid the frost. This wasn't terminus, but interlude in the sprawl's long game, New York's veins pulsing with whispers traded in bars and backrooms, alliances forged in subway's sway. Lily's harvest of loneliness loomed, seeds sown in sibling soil sprouting thorns to encircle her bed, James's gaze wandering inevitable, her pride a pyre self-lit. The city held ledgers unspoken, balances tilting inexorable toward reckoning, not in blood spill but isolation's slow starve, echoes of her steel vow rebounding empty in halls she'd claimed. I rose from the futon's sag, window framing Queen's modest lights, resolve hardening like concrete set under scaffold, patience my alloy, time the hammer shaping reprisals form. But for now, the metropolis reveled in their facsimile joy, feeds alight with toasts and tags, the chapel's bells tolling faint for unions forged in fracture's forge. I wandered Brooklyn's fringes that weekend, drawn back by masochism's pull, rain sheeting down in silver veils that slicked cobblestones and blurred neon's bleed. Umbrella forsaken, water traced cold paths down spine, washing traces of perfume and pollen from skin, each drop a baptism deferred. Streets emptied under downpour's lash, puddles mirroring signs fractured glow, bars spilling laughter muffled, cabs splashing past like judgment splashed. Solitude wrapped tight, not crushing but clarifying, the injustices burn a neon pulse in chest, vivid as Broadway's glare, fueling the cry that clawed silent up throat. Why her, the thief cloaked in kin's guise? Why not me, the builder broken on altars unbuilt? The rain intensified, drumming relentless on awnings like accusations unanswered, and I paused under a stoop's scant shelter, breath-fogging glass-paned door where warmth beckoned false. Passers hurried bowed, faces averted in shared isolation, the avenue a river carrying detritus of dreams deferred, wedding veils in trash bins, wilted lilies sodden in gutters. Rage tempered to resolve steel, the wise echo fading into action's hum, networks to nurture, paths to pave away from their shadow, the studio waiting as launchpad, not lair. A cab slowed, wipers slashing arcs, and I stepped to curb, hand raised in hail, the splash pooling at feet like spilled ink of stories rewritten. The door yielded to vinyls dry, drivers gnawed wordless as miles unspooled toward Queens, rain streaking windows in tears mimicry, but heart steadied, injustice's fire banked to embers glowing long. Night deepened as home neared, skyline silhouette a promise jagged and true, the studio's key turning smooth in lock that no longer stuck, a small victory in hardware's realm. Inside, the futon welcomed with its threadbare give, laptop opening to blank docs where words waited forging, narrative spun from ash to armor. Sleep beckoned eventual, rain's patter lulling like a dirge softened, dreams shifting from grips to gardens reclaimed, vines twisting not in bind but barrier. Dawn would rise unyielding, coffee brewing as ritual renewed, the month's fracture forging forward's edge, Lily's pride a pyre distant, James's satisfaction fleeting as subway sparks. The city slumbered uneasy, secrets burrowing deeper in concrete's veins, and in that burrow, my whisper joined, not end, but evolution, the wise wail transmuted to will's quiet roar.